It's quite the glare in my glasses, huh? Gonna try to do without them. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Jeff Bruce. I'm Jeff Bruce, and today we're gonna talk about why you need to be more optimistic. So it's kind of funny because last night I came home and I was just being really pessimistic and just kind of venting to my wife, and then realized I needed to make sure I had this video ready on being more positive and optimistic. So even I get pessimistic sometimes. So I had a period in my life where I was extremely pessimistic and negative in my thinking. And the truth is, it didn't just like happen all of a sudden. It really kind of slowly slithered its way into my life without me even really realizing it right away. It took a while for me to kind of figure out that, man, my thinking, my perspective on life and different situations was so pessimistic and so negative. Now, I think it's okay to sometimes be a little bit pessimistic. Sometimes it's kind of justified, or sometimes we just need to vent. And my wife and I do that with each other. But we all probably know people or person who just is just across the board, just negative all the time. You know, they're just talking about everybody. They're just looking at everything from the worst possible view. And I've said this before, and I've said it out loud to friends before, that negative talk actually makes great conversation. And it's true. It's kind of engaging and it sucks people in, but it really isn't a healthy thing to do. And you certainly don't want to be known as a negative and pessimistic person. At least I don't think anybody does. And so when it becomes a habit, or it becomes just kind of like who we are, just second nature to us, that is when, man, it's really depressing and damaging, and not just to ourselves, but to the people around us as well. Like, I really think pessimism and this negative mindset is infectious. It's like it's a virus. It's kind of like COVID, right? It just spreads from one person to another, and vaccines don't really seem to do much. So if you have been there before, or if you currently are there where you just have a negative view, a pessimistic view of the world, stay tuned, because I want to share with you how I went from being pessimistic to being a lot more optimistic. So I just want to share with you, it's not really a list, but just some things that I kind of learned, and I can look back and see what I did, some of the steps that I took to help me make this change. But one of the things I want to start with is, as a Christian, if you are a Christian, it really is not a good thing to be just eternally pessimistic. Again, it happens from time to time. Sometimes we just have a hard day and we need to talk to somebody about it. But ultimately, as a Christian, we have hope and we have joy in Christ and what he's done for our life. And so if nothing else, like even if we're having a really bad day, we always have that positive, that great hope in the future and in what God has done for us, his redemption and the grace that he extends to us every single day. So we always have that to be optimistic about. And the truth is, if we are always negative, yet we claim to be a Christian, it's really hard for people to see that, right? I mean, I think part of our testimony to other people isn't necessarily always our preaching the gospel to them or opening the Bible. It's just the way you view life, your perspective on life. And so being optimistic can actually be just a great testimony about your relationship with Christ. One of the first things that really helped me was just the realization that I just can't continually blame everybody. And I'm not sure if my wife pointed out to me or somebody pointed out to me just that, maybe I have a part in this. And instead of being, negative towards everybody else, maybe I need to look at myself as well. I don't recall what it was, but something sort of triggered the thought that, you know what, I'm in control of me. They're not in control of me. Now, as an employee, of course, I have supervisors and I do need to submit to authority to a certain extent. But that doesn't mean that I just submit to being walked on and being completely passive. And so near the end of this period in my life, I started to speak up. And it actually didn't really go my way. It didn't make things better, but it gave me a voice and it made me feel better that at least I knew, listen, I'm in control. I can speak up. I can voice my opinion and make kind of what's on my mind known to others. So I don't know if that necessarily sounds like being optimistic, But for me, it was the beginning of the change from being pessimistic about everybody and everything and beginning to be optimistic about who I was and the voice that I had. Okay, so I realized that kind of opens all kinds of doors, and especially when it comes to work, because you may be in a situation where maybe things are really bad, or you just really feel like it's having an effect on your mental health or your emotional health, whatever it might be. So understand that you can always leave a job. Now, I'm not saying you should go quit your job. You absolutely need to have a plan in place before you do that. But there's something else with that before you even consider leaving a job, because we really need to investigate what our part is in all that. Because you could go from one job to another and just keep on, having this attitude of like, this person's mean and that person's mean and they treat me bad and everything is just negative. And if that's the case, it could be that you have a bigger part in this than everybody else does. Sometimes our perspective has just gotten so pessimistic that we don't even realize that we're the ones that actually are bringing the problem every place we go. So again, that is something to really strongly consider and look at. Get different people's opinions, maybe even see a counselor before you make the major decision of leaving your job. But on the flip side, at the present time, it's 2022 right now, and the job market is wide open. So there are so many jobs available. So if you were going to leave a job and you made that decision, it's actually a pretty good market. But you get that job first lined up before you go leaving any kind of job. Okay, this is starting to sound more like job advice than being optimistic. My point is that it could be you that are being so pessimistic that you're kind of bringing the misery on yourself. So consider that before you make any big moves. So for me, I actually had the opportunity to leave my job and go to a new one. And it was really reassuring for me because that experience made me see that, yes, I was pessimistic. I was certainly infected by negativity, but having that change made me realize that it wasn't just me, because my experience at my new job, where I currently am as well, was like night and day between the two places. Okay, so that was a pretty heavy one. Let's go to something lighter, and this is something that I implemented as well. And it really starts with catching the fact that maybe you are pessimistic and negative. And the easy way to do this is to ask a friend or ask a spouse, or even just step back and listen to yourself. Listen to the way you talk and the way you communicate, and see, like, is everything coming out of my mouth negative? Do I feel kind of down and depressed all the time? Those are all key indicators that maybe it's just that you are having this negative perspective on the world. Another way to really realize this is to kind of find out if you are an overthinker. Do you overanalyze conversations? And I actually did a few videos on that recently. I'll link those down in the description, because that was a huge part of that period in my life where I questioned all of the things that I said and all of my thoughts and whether or not I should speak up. But my point here is it really helps to have someone to hold you accountable and to call you out when you're being negative and pessimistic all the time. One of the things that my wife and I do is we typically will go for a walk every day. Kind of started during COVID because we were just like, we got nothing else to do. We may as well just walk around the neighborhood. And it really became a very healthy thing for us, for our relationship, because we would spend some time maybe venting about work, but then just talking about our day. And we started to hold each other accountable. And we said, hey, listen, we just got to have a more positive perspective on our life. I've shared in videos before too how I brought negativity into our home and really started to infect my own family. And you really just want to cut that off and catch that before it becomes like a virus in your home. Okay, the next thing that really helped me a lot, and I've talked about him before. I'm not sure if you know who Donald Miller is. I've mentioned him in a few videos as well. Donald Miller is an author. He wrote a bunch of great books years ago, and then he started to talk about story. And he wrote something called Storyline, which was about kind of outlining your life and seeing it as a story. And then he started Story Brand, and now he does something called Business Made Simple. Donald, I would love a sponsorship. Give me a call, let's talk. But Storyline is kind of a workbook. And so basically what Donald Miller did is, if you read fiction books or watch movies, any movie kind of works with this. But there's always a protagonist, which I think, is that right? I think that's like the main character who's kind of good. And then the antagonist, the bad guy. Hopefully I got that right. But basically every book, every movie, you have a character and they're just kind of walking through life, and then pretty quickly in the beginning of the story something happens. Either they have some major difficulty in their life, or there is an enemy, or something terrible happens to them, and that gets the story going. And all throughout the story, we're kind of hoping as the audience to see, can this person overcome their circumstances? Can they overcome the villain, whatever it might be? And it always catches our attention, right? I mean, every single Marvel movie is exactly the same. Good guy faces somebody bad, they kind of go up and down, and finally in the end, they typically come back and win. And with Donald Miller, just kind of in a nutshell, what he says is we are kind of like that character in this story. And if we didn't face those difficulties, those hard circumstances, those villains, we would have a really, really boring story. It's all those difficult things that we face that make our life interesting. Those are the times where we learn the most about who we are and how to conquer the things that we face in our life. From a spiritual perspective, I really believe that's how God shapes and forms us. Those are the trials that we go through in our life. And I can look back at all the different circumstances in my life, and they're all kind of relative. Like, you may have had some significantly more difficult circumstances than I ever faced, but to me, they felt like they were big deals. But I can look back at those and see how God used almost each and every one of those to make me into who I am today. And most of those, even this period in my life that I'm talking about, I don't regret it at all. It was really hard when I was there, but had I not gone through that, I couldn't be where I was today. And so it's kind of hard to get yourself into this way of thinking. But if you can do it, if you can identify the circumstances you're facing and say, hey, listen, I need to face this, I need to conquer this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the outcome is going to be on the other side. It's a great way to kind of be more optimistic, knowing that actually God may be using this time to form you and mold you into who he wants you to be. And I know that sometimes when you are just in the midst of these circumstances, it can be really hard to start to think this way. But that's why I'm telling you, because if you can, it really makes facing those things so much better and so much easier. I think probably one of the best ways to come at this is to take a moment and step back and write down what are the hurdles, who is the antagonist in my life. Don't use this as an opportunity to embrace the victim mentality, but just kind of take it as an opportunity to say, okay, I have these things in front of me that I need to face. What is the outcome that I want to see? Even write that down. Write down the outcome that you expect and then work towards it, kind of like a goal. So now you have a system in place to actually approach the difficult things that you have in your life. And it makes it a lot easier to choose to be optimistic towards those things rather than having a negative perspective towards them. So the last thing I'll say to kind of wrap this up, and I feel like I could probably do 2 or 3 episodes on this because there's so much that really we can do and so many tools we have to kind of come at this thing. But one of the last things I would say is while you have that pen and paper out is to start to write down the wins that you have. And I've kind of shared that idea before with overthinking and the different things that we face. When you're overthinking, you start to write down the ways that you stopped overthinking or that you did speak up. And it's really the same thing with this. As you overcome hurdles, and maybe you have a journal, like I do my time with God in the morning and I journal a little bit. Write down in there the wins that you have. Give God the credit for those things as well. But that is a great way to look back and see, you know what? I can see what God has done in my life. I can see how these things have made me a better person. And I think that will give you overall just a more optimistic view of life. All right, guys, I hope you found some of this helpful and I hope you can actually apply it to your life. I know for me, it really was a game changer to the way I went at life. But if you think, you are just a pessimist, you're an overthinker, or you're passive, check out the video that I'll link at the end here on the 4 communication styles. And if you really like this video, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button. See you guys next time.